There is a dimension beyond the mundane, a realm where the ordinary twists into the extraordinary, a place where shadows conceal secrets and the unexpected and bizarre lurk around every corner. Welcome to Pulp. I am Catherine Emsley, your host. Each episode I'll bring you a chilling tale about the things we don't notice, but which are very much there, waiting to be discovered. So step into the unknown and let your imagination run wild. Hey listeners, and welcome to the new chapter of Pulp. I'm so excited for this new direction. While I'll miss writing fictional tales, I can't wait to share some truly bizarre and spooky stories with you. Also, just an FYI, if you hear noises in the background, sorry, that's my puppy, and there is just no way to keep him quiet. Besides, I do want this to be a lot less formal now, okay? I hope you'll enjoy this new format. If you do, please consider leaving a rating or review, or both. It really does help me, and right now I need all the help I can get. Okay, so if you know someone who likes the strange and unusual things, then please also share this podcast with them. Okay, so settle in, get comfy, and let's dive into it. After a brutal fire in 1968, FCK was presumed dead by the vigilante group who had taken it upon themselves to get the justice that they were denied. However, somehow, he had miraculously survived. After recovering from his wounds, he returned to the town where he had once been outcast and rejected, and he began a murderous spree which led him to become one of America's most vicious and heartless serial killers. This is the story of FCK. At age 18, a beautiful and dutiful young girl by the name of Amanda decided to follow her calling and become a nun. She chose Mary Helena as her name in Christ. In 1941, she was given her first assignment, which was to care for the inmates at the Western Hills Psychiatric Hospital. The patients she was to care for were housed in a wing that they called the Tower. This was where their most disturbed and needy patients were housed. This was most certainly a difficult task and introduction to the sisterhood for Sister Young Mary Helena. Now, nearing the end of her first year at her new position, it was just a few days away from Christmas. Sister Mary Helena was accidentally locked in the tower when the guards, who were in a hurry to go home to their families, accidentally locked her in the facility. She was left alone with the inmates for several days, and during this time she was brutally raped and beaten countless times. When she was finally found by the guards, she was barely alive, and tragically she was pregnant. And I'm sure you're also asking yourself, how is it that they didn't find her for several days? I actually have no idea. I couldn't find any information on this. So Sister Mary Helena, forced to carry the child to term, gave birth 9 months later to a little boy that she named Frederick. Shortly after this, the infant was handed over to the state and later adopted by a man called Mr. Underwood, who tragically for young Frederick was an abusive alcoholic. Frederick, unsurprisingly, had a terrible childhood, and even less surprisingly, he turned to a life of crime himself. A rage burned inside him for his awful childhood, but also from the knowledge of how it was that he came to be conceived. It's not exactly known how he found out, but it is suspected that he may have heard the story from Sister Mary Helena himself, who was later seen in court at Frederick's trial. Now, Frederick was arrested after a lengthy investigation for a string of vicious murders of numerous children. The media sensationalized the story and labeled him the Springwood Slasher. I really hate it when the media does that. Frederick's attorney, however, managed to get him released and the charges dropped because of a technicality. Numerous articles claim that the search warrant hadn't been correctly executed, so the evidence couldn't be used. Without the evidence, there was no case against Frederick, and he walked free. His newfound freedom and clean record, however, didn't last long, as the vigilante mob, who was made up of family members of Frederick's victims, took it upon themselves to seek the justice that they deserved. Frederick wasn't able to escape the angry mob, who soon had him cornered. They tied him up and poured gasoline on him in the same boiler room in which he had killed their children. They lit a match and walked away, thinking that he had perished. Sister Mary Helena, distraught from the trial, Frederick's release, and his subsequent supposed death, took her life by hanging herself in the tower, the same one in which she had been raped and tortured. Following her death, the hospital closed down that wing, sealing the doors and moving the patients to neighboring facilities. And can I just interrupt the story here for a second, because for a nun to take her life, you've got to know that mental state must have been beyond any kind of salvation or hope. And also, I was really shocked to learn that even after her ordeal, she was still working at the same hospital. I couldn't find anything about whether or not she was still caring for the same patients in the tower. But still, she had to go there every day and would have seen the building. She may even have seen some of the patients. I just can't imagine that. And that must have been just a whole different kind of mental torture on its own. Okay, so years passed after the fire, and nobody was ever held responsible. Stories and urban legends popped up and were spread amongst the kids, but nothing more than that came of it. Okay, it was just urban legends, stories, children being children. Until in 1981, a string of mysterious deaths began to occur among the children of the town. The children would go to bed in perfect health and be found the following morning deceased in their beds, but they were in these strange contorted positions. And I saw some images of these, and I've got to say that it's the kind of stuff that nightmares are made of. It was soon noticed that the children that were dying were mainly the children who'd had siblings killed by Frederick a decade earlier. Fear gripped the youth of the town, and kids were said to have begged and pleaded their parents for help because, quote, they were being terrorized by a man named Freddy in their dreams, unquote. Parents, aware of the urban legend being told at the school, put it down to that and nightmares, but the killings didn't stop. For a decade, children in the town would die in the same way. Right, so as a child of the 80s, I've just got to say that this isn't really very surprising. It was quite normal for the latchkey generation to be left to defend themselves. So while this would never fly today, back then it was actually quite normal. Okay. So for a decade, the children in the town continued to die in this mysterious way in their sleep, and there were no signs of an intruder or any foul play. A new urban legend popped up, and I'm going to tell you about that one because even to this day there is no real explanation as to what actually happened to the children in that town. So the legend says that Frederick did actually die in the fire, and this is where the paranormal part of the story comes in. He did die in the fire, but it is said that his spirit lingered on in a different realm, where he was able to murder the children in their dreams. And with each child that died, Frederick grew stronger and was able to start blurring the line between reality and the realm in which his spirit was caught. Apparently, Frederick had a daughter called Catherine. Yikes. Okay, but I didn't find any information about her birth or who her mother was, but her name is spelled differently to mine, so let's just remember that. The legend goes on to say that Frederick needed his daughter Catherine, who was now an adult and living under the alias Maggie Burroughs. She worked as a counselor to troubled teenagers. Good for her. Maggie was raised by an adoptive parents, and psychiatrists say that thankfully she had suppressed the disturbing memories of her early childhood. Anyway, they say that Frederick eventually found Maggie and tried to convince her to help him escape. Luckily, though, Maggie Burroughs proved that a compulsion for murder was not hereditary, and instead sought the help of a co-worker. He's a dream psychiatrist. That's Bugsy. She sought the help of her co-worker, a dream psychiatrist, to help her biological father's spirit to move on. Maggie succeeded in pulling Frederick through the veil and into reality, where she stabbed him in the abdomen and shoved a pipe bomb in his chest. I don't know how. This effectively killed him, I'm sure, and it also released the demons which had given him his power. This is definitely giving sort of Exorcist on steroids vibes to me. Frederick's spirit, though less powerful, tried many times over the years to continue his killing spree. But eventually, at long last, authorities believed Wait. So his daughter couldn't have killed him then. I'm going to have to check my notes, but maybe she just sent him or weakened him, because if he was still around... Okay, this is where the legend just doesn't make sense to me. Let me start again. Frederick's spirit, though less powerful, tried many times over the years to continue his killing spree. But eventually, at long last, authorities believed what the children were saying and learned how Frederick operated. A huge undertaking was put into effect. They removed obituaries, articles, any media about previous deaths and killings, and they quarantined anyone who had ever dreamed about or even knew about Frederick. They also say that the children of Springwood were given a drug called Hypnosil. I've never heard of it before, but they say that it prevents you from dreaming. Eventually, the town was finally able to rid itself of Frederick. Of course, if the legend is true, and the spirit of Frederick Charles Krueger has lost all its power because nobody was left to remember, then I wouldn't be sitting here telling you about this case. So either the legend is entirely bogus, or... 1, 2, no more sleep for you. 3, 4, this rhyme is a chore. 5, 6, copyright says mix. 7, 8, I know it's not great. 9, if you enjoyed this episode and want to support the podcast, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. Your support means the world to me and will help me to keep this podcast going. So until next time, cheers.